Happy Monday, everyone. It's time for the Helix of Success live stream here. Rolov is happy human being being in the Provence with the beautiful forests surrounding him and nice weather with sun and I guess warmth because he's sitting in t-shirt. And I'm in a rainy Reykjavik where it's +8 at the moment of Celsius. So, Rolov, welcome, and let's talk about the intellectual safety.
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm going to tell you what. So, what do you think is intellectual safety, Anna? Let's start with you for a change.
Well, I'm a bit private because I know where we're coming from, right? I know the Harvard Business Review article that we're basing this conversation on. What in the article, it was actually coined as intellectual bravery, right? And to me, it sounded a lot as a sister term, let's say, to the psychological safety that you need to have in the team for the great performance, right? And here, I would say it's a bit of a subset of the psychological safety that is coined specifically for having the creativity and risk management in the teamwork.
Yeah. Actually, I find it quite interesting that they did use the word intellectual bravery. And it was because you could actually see a very much, I would say, very much an American style here, that you have to be, you're helping your employees here to be brave. And to me, it's such a weird idea that your mindset is that, so it's really there's a fear dominated paradigm at the back of that. We all need to be brave to speak up. And and that is, to me, that's weird. That's, it shouldn't be about bravery being speaking up. Around you, people, you should be happy to speak up, and and enjoy speaking up, and that's what people. So there's no, as far as I'm concerned, there's no bravery. It's like you don't have to be brave to go out and drive on the road, or you shouldn't have to be brave. You just want to drive safely. So people don't tell you drive bravely. They just ask you to drive safely, and say drive bravely is weird, because you say, look, are the roads that dangerous? That's the question you're going to get. And the answer is no, and there shouldn't be. And in most organizations, actually, it isn't the case. But I do know that in the U.S., and I've worked a while in the U.S., there is some of this very much hierarchical view. So there is a difference between the European style on this and I think the U.S. style, which is what maybe sort of say it's not about intellectual bravery, it's about intellectual safety. So good point. Go ahead.
I love the shift. I really love the shift. I actually wanted to ask you why you kind of rephrased it from intellectual bravery to intellectual safety. And your explanation now, it just blows my mind. It opens up for a lot of thoughts, actually, because I've been reflecting that quite often, that people call me quite often brave. When I moved to Sweden from Ukraine, when I did this and that, and then moved to Iceland and started my own business and so on. And I never considered myself brave. It's more exploration for me and curiosity that is really feeding this. But now I see what you mean. Like when people are thinking about their own fears and they project their fears on me, I am brave in their eyes.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's
so
very,
what
very
you actually have is you have a very high level of your own intellectual safety. You feel your safety space is much larger than people. I would say a lot of people around you, not your average. And that's what makes you able to do what you do, is because you have a very large safety space, and people can walk into the safety space and then they start to feel that intellect. So you sort of provide, and not just you, I do the same thing too. So I recognize exactly the same thing. So you have a very large intellectual safety net, put it that way, and people can climb on. And this is what intellectual safety is about trying to. Either you have it yourself, or you try to put out an intellectual safety net, which people can feel. Okay, so now I can walk around here because if I'm going to fall, there's this net. So I think the rest of our discussion is, what does that net look like, and how do you put that net out?
Exactly. As a leader, how do you build that safety net for your team?
As a leader, as a mentor, as a coach, the same thing. And to me, those things are very, very much the same. I mean, a leader should be a mentor, should be coaching. So that's a good. So it's another visual here. It's now. So think of the circus artist with the intellectual safety net, and below the net there's a river flowing just to blow your mind completely. So we have all the visuals that we've been putting together there. So the first thing that you do is really is to fall, and I'm taking the circus metaphor just a little bit further. And in falling, you show that you don't hurt yourself. In other words, you know how to fall. So you demonstrate that you fall. So what you often do, or what I wouldn't say you, what I often do, is I will begin with something where I screwed up. I always love to try to figure out a story of something where I just messed up, something like that. And by doing that, then obviously I'm putting myself out there, but I'm not really, because just like you feel quite comfortable about that. So there's no form of bravery, but it does give the other person the chance to say, well, if I fall or screw up, apparently it's not going to be so bad, because if he or she is willing to talk about how they screwed up, they're not going to judge me on the way that I screwed up, probably. Well, that's true, because so you try to come up with a story, say, look, I don't know, and it could be anything really. You can say, look, did you have trouble getting in the building? I walked down 6 corridors before I got here. I was completely confused. I have no idea, and that could be one, or it could be really anything. It could be a story that's related to the subject that you're tackling. It doesn't really matter. The point is really just to say, to bring up something, and if it's humorous, all the better. People like humor. It puts people at ease, and as a story, it gets people's attention immediately. Once you start, there's nothing better than telling a story. This is how I screwed up. Then everybody loves those kind of stories. So that's the first step in building that intellectual safety net. You want to say?
And
something?
I want to pause here and expand a bit on this. You said give an example of how you have been failing with something, exploring something, and so on, right? And you give an example with the corridors, for example. I think it's beautiful because it shows it doesn't have to be about your biggest failure if you don't feel safe and comfortable with talking about that. But I know a lot of people who would listen and say and think, yeah, but I don't want to show up as the failure or show up as incompetent, unprofessional, and so on and so forth. So let's address that.
Okay. So first off, I use the word screw up because it's a little bit more powerful than failure. Because if you're aiming to climb a mountain, and you didn't reach the top because the temperature, you failed, but you didn't screw up. So you really want to get to the screw up level. I'm really using that word. So again, but the point is well taken. You say, look, do I want to go out there? And the first thing I'm going to say about myself is, how did I screw up? The answer is yes, because it's one of the things of being a professional is the ability to handle. Well, one is not to be really concerned about what other people think. You really want to show that you have your own power to do that. And one of the things that you're talking about professional reminds me of large meetings and there's stuff being discussed and really nobody understands it. And there is one guy or girl, I'll always say girl, who will, at some point say, look, I really don't understand this. And there's a silence because one, they just put the bull in the china shop. They just made the remark that everybody was afraid to say it. So they think, okay, so this person isn't afraid of saying, I don't understand it. So they might be saying, well, does that mean I'm incompetent? Well, maybe the case, but I'm putting it out there because I want to get to the truth. Other people always consider that to be a sign of professionalism. There is not a single person in the room who would say, look, he or she is incompetent. They would say, look, they're showing intellectual truth, honesty, and in order to do that, they must have a high level of intellectual safety. And if they have a high level of intellectual safety, they must be highly professional. That's how the mind works.
Yeah, I want to chime in here with this. Now you're talking, and I actually remember that quite a lot of times I was called brave when I was speaking up at the meetings and saying like, okay, I don't understand, I'm not following, or this goes against what we discussed previously, and so on. Just really calling out those elephants in the room, and people would come to me later and say, "That was so brave," because I wouldn't be the top person in the room, but I would still speak up. And I know for a fact that every time I did that, there were at least 10% of others in the meeting who would agree, who thought the same, but didn't speak up.
Yeah.
So first of all, by that, really you you lead by example. You show that, okay, that's fine here to speak up. And think about how relieved those other people are every time when you do it. And secondly, you give the permission. And here comes the example of one of my favorite coaches. She's Swedish, Mia Törnblom. She was the first guest on my podcast. And she used to be a drug addict. Now she's been sober for 24 years, I think. And she's very open about that. She's been into criminal circles and so on and so forth during those years of her young life. And she says, I always bring it up when I come and coach the leaders, because she's working with the biggest companies in Sweden and Norway. And when she comes into those steering groups and leadership groups, she starts with her story. And she says, whatever you decide that you can you've screwed up in your leadership journey, I've done worse things. You don't have nothing to surprise me. So bring it on. So again, as a leader, when you show up this way for your people, you give them permission. Yeah. Give them permission to screw up and talk about it.
And to talk about it. Yeah. So that opens the room, letting people talk back.
Yeah, I'm listening. I just want to close the door. So I like it. So yeah, let's talk about how what are the other ways we can actually build that safety net for our people.
Well, the second one is once you've done that, is to hold back in giving your advice. Basically, if you're the leader, and at the start of the meeting, everybody is highly tuned to how are you going to, what culture, what atmosphere you're putting there. So you really want to try to avoid putting out an opinion. The usual one will be, does everybody agree that this way would be the best way that we should approach stuff? Kind of very obvious one. But that's obviously, once you do that, you've pretty much closed down the conversation. So there's a couple of things that you can do there. I mean, one, of course, is to hold back on your opinion. Say, look, I'm interested in hearing what you guys have, and I want to hear. And then it could be that you ask people, just say, I want to not hear negatives, but ask somebody. You can ask specifically someone. Say, look, I want a devil's advocate here, somebody who's going to, really help us tear this down. Even though I think it might be a good idea, I want to hear that. So I'm going to score you if you say that, and how well you can tear this idea down. So you can actually assign somebody that role. You give them specific permission to do that, and if you do it to one, then again it shows that you're absolutely open to having an open discussion. Because if one person can bring in whatever negatives on that, then that means other people can do too. They get the idea. You're not just giving permission to that single person. They understand it means you're opening the floor to doing that. So that's a second aspect of that. It's just holding back. So that's really three things. One is holding back and giving what your opinion is, obviously. So question and say, what do you think about it? What do you think about it? And going around the room, basically, and making sure that pretty much, especially some people who weren't talking, that you basically, you specifically address them and say, look, you haven't said much on this. I mean, what do you think about it? Maybe they don't have anything to think about it. Okay, well, that's life. But sometimes they often will once you specifically address them. And again, look for the negatives also, in the sense of make sure people put that on the table. And you could even, it's a technique that really is nice, is where you try to reduce advocacy. Advocacy means that which is a typical male-dominated meeting, is where people coming in, they're not afraid to talk. That's not the problem. In fact, everybody's talking, and everybody's talking over each other to try to get their opinion or their viewpoint, on the table and argue for it. And other people argue against it. I mean, that's also typical. So there's no fear going on there. There's just a lot of testosterone flying around. One of the things you could also do is to switch people's roles. So you say, look, I know you're positive about there, but I want you to take on the other role of being negative about what are the cons of your thing, and I want somebody else who actually had the cons to start to advocate for the pros. So you change the roles around in terms of who does that. So now that's a technique that really is great. I don't see it used often, but it really is a way of moving away from advocacy-based discussions where we're just trying to get their own viewpoint through, and they're not willing to listen to what others are saying. So that's another.
So here you dropped quite a lot of ideas already, and I want to kind of chime in and summarize a bit. And I would actually break it down in a couple more steps, not one or two. So first you said, wait with, like, hold your opinions, right? And I like how Simon Sinek talks about that. For quite a while, there was trendy to talk about that the leader speaks least, right, and listens more. So you have 2 ears, 1 mouth, that means something. But he was talking about, I speak last, not only least, but last.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a good point. Secondly, I quite often hear this in a conversation when people are like trying to be open, and then they say, but don't you think?
Yeah.
And that is advocacy, just what you're saying. So pay attention to what you're saying. If you use those phrases, but as yes, but don't you think, or without but, just don't you think, that means that you as a leader are already pushing your ideas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have to have an incredible intellectual safety and psychological safety on the team for people to speak up against that.
Yeah.
So be mindful.
What you can also do there is give someone the role to actually to monitor you. So you can actually say, look, sometimes I fall into the habit. I get too enthusiastic about my own ideas, and I start, and you can be quite honest and say, I know, look, I'm the boss here, or what have you. So I know if I say something, people say, but I don't want that. So I want, you could name some specific person who you think, isn't scared, sort of Anna lookalike, who isn't scared of taking on the role. And say, look, I want you to make sure if you see me overstepping, that you say, look, rule off you're pushing your ideas too much. So, so cool it a little bit. And so in other words, that's another thing. So you're giving people permission to contradict the boss, not only in terms of the content, but also in terms of behavior. Yeah. So there's another intellectual safety method that you could throw out there.
For sure. Anything else you would like to bring up as the methods or techniques how to build that net?
Obviously, but this is more is that you can at the end. It's probably the same thing almost, but just ask people did we miss something? Go around, make sure that you address everybody in the room and say, look, is there anything you think we should have tackled? Anything we missed there? So again, this is showing that you respect each person's opinion. So that runs to the end of the meeting. So I'll put that in as the last bit on the list.
Great. What I quite often do in my team, especially if there is someone new coming onto the team or taking over a task from me when I try to delegate, I say, this is how I've done so far, but that's just my way of surviving through this task. So by no means is it optimal, is it optimized and perfect. So I'm just teaching you what I've done so far. And then please, your brain is younger because all my team members are younger than me. So you have totally different approach to things. So especially when it comes to technology and social media, please use that. I want that. That's why I hire you, right? Or that's why I have you on the team. Yeah. I want you to bring that. So by no means am I saying that my way is the way. It was just my way of getting this task done by far, but I wanted to optimize, and that's why I want you to take ownership of it. So really talking about the tasks that way, for example, having those kind of conversations, saying like, okay, yeah, I know it's imperfect. Sometimes you even like if I know something that is more optimal than my way, I say about that. But then I just say like, yeah, I've done what I could with my resources. What would you do? How do you want to continue with it so that you feel the ownership of it and you're happy to do it and you're proud of the results and so on?
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that, Anna. I think you've summarized it perfectly.
Great. Now we are actually just under 21 minutes, so maybe that's a perfect spot to finish our 20-minute Helix of Success discussion. What do you say, Roelof?
I say yes. I agree.
Yeah. Enjoy the Provence. As I said in the pre-chat, I'm happy for you, and you said, I'm jealous. I'm not. I'll get to the sun as well later this year. But I'm really happy that it's possible for you. And I hope wherever you are, dear listeners and viewers, that you're enjoying your life as well, whether it's rainy like here or sunny like for Olaf. And have a great, productive, successful week, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for the chat again, Anna. Always things to learn for both of us, I think.
Always a pleasure, Olaf.